Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, April 10th, 2018. I'm Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. Duane Long under the weather today, so we had to go for a backup. Yes, it did cause us to expand the salary cap, but we have for you the Dean of Ohio State recruiting, Bill Kurelic. There was no Bucknuts Live this weekend, so you people are geeked to hear from Bill. William, how are you this fine morning?
Doing very well, Dan, doing well, and ready to go on another day here.
As you are wont to do, yesterday you had the information everybody wanted to hear as we continue to follow the recruitment of Ohio State's top target and the top target in the United States, Zack Harrison, Bill's neighbor. So, Bill, Zack's recruitment is coming a little bit into focus. Why don't you bring the people up to speed on your barbecue buddy?
Well, he is going to make his first official visit. That's scheduled now, and it is to Penn State the weekend of April 20th. That's Penn State's spring game, their blue-white game on April 21st, so he'll be there for that. Not surprising that Penn State would be his first official visit. I don't think Ohio State wants to be the first official visit. I think they want to be the last official visit. And as I've long been saying, I believe those are the top two schools. I believe Ohio State and Penn State are the top two. I think right now, if I put it in order, again, he isn't saying any order or whatever, but just, the way I feel about it is that Ohio State leads Penn State, who leads Michigan. That brings us to the next topic this weekend. Michigan and Ohio State have spring games. Same day, April 14th. What is he going to do? As of right now, the plan is that he's going to go to Michigan's spring game. That could change, but that's the plan right now. And before any Ohio State fans get near that ledge, ready to jump off, Zack has been to Ohio State many times. It's not even close of which school he's been to the most. It's Ohio State far and away. He was there again actually on Friday morning, this past Friday morning for a little bit. He went to Ohio State's spring game last year. So it's not a question really of him choosing because he likes Michigan more to go to their spring game. It's a situation where he hasn't been there much, and he hasn't been to their spring game. So not a huge deal for Ohio State. And, again, I think they're going to get, in my opinion, will likely get the last official visit.
Yeah, the important factor here is he's a Columbus native, so that affects how the visits will go down. If anything, like you said, the last visit mythology still has a chance to come through, so we will be following that. And obviously, anyone who's followed this knows if you want information on Zack Harrison, you need to be here with Bill on Bucknuts. Another guy you had some information on, actually from my old stomp area a little bit, the Northern Virginia, North Stafford, southern part of the D.C. suburbs, Devin Ford, a running back. Running backs have been a hot topic since Samson James out of Indiana committed a little while back. There's some question as to how many backs they will take in the class. Do you believe Devin Ford will be the second back in this class?
I think it's a very realistic possibility, especially, and I have written about Steele Chambers. He's a running back, but he's a linebacker too. They could theoretically take both Devin Ford and Steele Chambers and still theoretically be at two running backs because, again, Steele Chambers could slot as an athlete. They've told him you could play either position, running back, linebacker at Ohio State. And I have crystal ball Steele Chambers to Ohio State. I think Devin Ford certainly could be in this Ohio State class. Right now, and I was talking to a source pretty familiar with Devin Ford's recruitment, and in fact, I'd say very familiar with his recruitment. And the source told me that right now they feel like Virginia Tech, Ohio State are both right there at the top of his list, and they both lead Penn State at this point. That's the top three. That's his three official visits. He'll visit Virginia Tech for their spring game this weekend. He'll go to Penn State's spring game on the 21st, and then he'll visit Ohio State the following weekend for his three official visits. He could take other official visits before he announces on May 18th, or he could just end with Ohio State. We'll see how that goes, but likely, in all likelihood, it will come down to one of those three schools.
Yeah, and for those who are concerned to see a school like Virginia Tech among Penn State and Ohio State, who kind of recruit at a higher level, you got to understand that is prime Hokie recruiting territory there in Northern Virginia. So, in that respect, it makes complete sense. Would you assume, let's say hypothetically, Devin Ford would commit to Ohio State? That would take them out of the Trey Sanders running. Would you agree?
Well, yeah. But to be honest, I'm not sure they're really in that running. In my opinion,
okay.
I've never really felt he is going to go to Ohio State, and I still don't. I would be pretty shocked if that were to happen.
Speaking of quick offensive players, we had one of them from the East Coast update his status recently. Rocket Ronnie Hickman. I have long said on these airwaves with you or when Steve is on here that I would be shocked if the Rocket was not a Buckeye. He did come out with his top 6. Window dressing, in your opinion, before an ultimate commitment to the Buckeyes?
Probably. Yeah, I feel good about Ohio State's chances of ending up there. He's been to Ohio State a number of times. In fact, one of the very early times that Rocket visited Ohio State, he told me how much he liked the Buckeyes and had Ohio State at the top of his list. I felt like he was pretty much ready to commit to Ohio State at that point. And again, that was a very early point in his recruitment. So, yeah, I mean, he's got great relationships with Ohio State staff. He likes everything Ohio State has to offer. It just all makes sense.
Bill, last question, actually second to last. Let's talk quarterbacks here. Sam Howell, a prime target of the Buckeyes for a while, a guy we talked about the last time you were here on the air, has verbally committed to Florida State in the last 24 hours. I've also seen a crystal ball for Grant Gunnell to attend Oregon and Michael Johnson to attend Miami. Now, those aren't locked in stone, obviously, but bring us up to speed on the quarterback recruiting. These are 3 names we talked about a lot, and now looks like could be headed elsewhere.
Well, the big names with Ohio State's quarterback recruitment have been, as you mentioned, Sam Howell, Grant Gunnell, Max Duggan, who people aren't giving enough credit for Ohio State's interest in him. They are very interested in Max Duggan. I don't feel like right now he's going to end up at Ohio State, but still, I think it should be mentioned that Ohio State definitely is interested in him. There's Graham Arts that is another one. Don't feel like he's going to end up at Ohio State and change his mind on things. And then Jaden Daniels. You know, those are the guys that Ohio State has been pretty heavily involved with. Jalen Jones is another one, but he committed to Florida this past weekend. So I think that all those guys are kind of in have been a bunch together in that quarterback derby for Ohio State. The thing is, you know, which one ends up at Ohio State? It wouldn't be shocking to me that if none of them ended up at Ohio State at this point. You know, of course, like I mentioned, a couple of them have already committed elsewhere. But we'll see how things go. And one thing we all know is that Urban Meyer, you know, if something doesn't work out with one recruit, he always seems to find another recruit that when things finish up is just as good or better than the other guys. So Ohio State, you know, they're continuing. Ryan Day is continuing to look hard at all the quarterbacks across the country. And, you know, I just think that whoever the guy is, that it'll be a good one. Matthew Baldwin kind of came out of nowhere last year, and he's a pretty darn good quarterback.
I was going to say Matthew Baldwin kind of came out of nowhere. Joe Burrow kind of came out of nowhere. We thought Dwayne Haskins was a memory before he came back. So I think patience will be a virtue here when it comes to quarterbacks. All right, Bill, let's finish up with this. Obviously, the spring game is coming up this weekend. It's a recruiting extravaganza. Give the people a little taste of what will be going on at Ohio State this weekend and some big names to watch for.
Well, there's at least 4 or 5 guys that could make official visits to Ohio State this weekend, at least. The 2, though, that are certainties are 2 huge names, and I've got them both crystal ball to Ohio State. Those 2 being offensive lineman Harry Miller from Georgia an absolute tremendous center prospect, number one on the board. And then wide receiver Garrett Wilson from Texas, kind of another family friend, so to speak. Interesting little tidbit. I coached his older brother on my AAU team many years ago. But I like Ohio State's chances with both of those guys, and those are the two guys that those are set in stone. They will make official visits to Ohio State this weekend. And again, I like Ohio State's chances with both of those guys. And you talk about, I don't think it's going to happen this weekend. In fact, I'd be pretty surprised if it did, but eventually I think they'll get those two. Although, again, it's a close battle for both of them between Ohio State and at least one other school. So we'll see how that goes. But as far as other things this weekend, there's going to be obviously a lot of players on unofficial visits to Ohio State this weekend, and you know, that's always really important. I look back at my stories last year on the prospects that were going to visit Ohio State for the spring game and how many of them had either committed or would end up committing to Ohio State. It's high. You know, the number of guys that come to Ohio State usually make up about half of them at least were at the Buckeye spring game. So, you know, keep in mind to watch the guys this weekend that make the spring game that aren't necessarily on official visits. Like Paris Johnson, number one offensive tackle in the country. He's going to be at the spring game, and certainly he's a guy that Ohio State would love to have. Class of 2020, just a super prospect. Jalen McCullough from Georgia is another one that's supposed to be at the spring game. That's tremendous prospect. Class of 2019, and, you know, the list goes on and on. So it'll be an exciting weekend.
It will be an exciting weekend, and obviously you know that our coverage of it, anchored by Bill himself, will be the best you can get anywhere. We appreciate Bill stopping by and stepping in for Duane. Have a good one, Bucknutters.